As a Surge member, you'll unlock access to resources that build confidence, motivation, and mental well-being to empower girls to stay in the game today and pave the way for their future success. Up your game with free professional development and curriculum resources for coaches and athletes. Foster community and connection with VIP access to girls' sporting events, coaching forums, giveaways, and workshops hosted by industry-leading partners. Make waves with exclusive Surge branding packages, designs, and apparel. Recognize and celebrate with special awards like Team of the Season and Athlete of the Season to uplift and honor your female athletes. Unlock exclusive offers, including new product sneak peeks, promos, and member-only Surge stores. Fresh content designed to empower female athletes will be added to the platform every month. So, together, we can help power girls forward.
Awesome little video for you guys to get us started. But I want to welcome you all to today's Surge webinar co-hosted with WeCOACH. Today's conversation, Coaching for Change, What Coaches Need to Know About Empowering Female Athletes, will be a panel discussion moderated by Erica Nelson Flowers, COO and Deputy Director of Leadership Programs of WeCOACH. Before we get started, I want to thank you all for being here. We know as coaches, parents, educators, and athletes, you're all extremely busy, so we really appreciate it. I will now pass things off to Erica to kick off today's conversation. Welcome, Erica.
Thanks, Saxton. Thank you, everyone, as Saxton mentioned, for joining us today. Those of you who may not be familiar with WeCOACH, we are a one-of-a-kind nonprofit membership organization focused on the recruitment, advancement, and retention of women coaches in all sports on all levels. We do this through year-round programming, focus on the growth and professional development of women through our programs. So I'm excited to be with you today, leading this conversation with three amazing panelists who I've enjoyed getting to know by reading their bios and in the aspect of Coach Mike, following his career, having been a fan of softball for many, many years, going back to his last hurrah. Last game with the USA softball team there in Athens, Greece. So that being said, certainly excited to lead this discussion where we're focusing on coaching for change, what coaches need to know about empowering female athletes. And I know that with the three different dynamics and aspects of sports that our panelists bring to this discussion, it's going to be a really fruitful conversation. And so in addition to the questions that I have prepared, we definitely want to invite our audience and all of you listening to put questions in the chat as well, so that we can make sure that this is certainly a discussion where you have the ability to ask questions based on what you hear from our panelists and questions that maybe you've come up with over the course of preparing for today's webinar. All of that being said, I will just give a quick intro of our three panelists, and then we will jump right into our questions. So first and foremost, we have Jay Jones. Jay is the commissioner for the HCAC, which is the Heartland Collegiate Athletic Conference. He's been there since July of 2019. He had 2 tours at the NCAA and working as an associate director for Division II governance, and then also as a director of AMA, the Academic and Membership Affairs group. Also was a commissioner for 4 years at the Sunshine State, say that 3 times fast, the Sunshine State Conference, as well for 4 years down in Florida. So Jay, thank you for being with us. And secondly, we want to go to Alicia Pelton. Alicia is the program director for Coaching Her at the University of Minnesota Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sports. She has over 30 years of experience as a coach, as a high school athletic director, an educator, a business owner, and she brings all that and as it relates to specializing and taking all of that research that they put together at the Tucker Center and putting that into action. So we know words and research without action is nothing. And so really excited to have you and to learn from your experience, everything that you've done over the course of your career, Alicia. Thank you Coach Mike Candrea, thank you for being with us as well. He certainly is synonymous with softball success. His career with USA Softball took place over the span of 10 years, beginning in 1994, where he was an assistant with the USA Softball team, and made it all the way through a 10-year span, ending in 2004 at the Olympics in Athens, Greece. Where our softball team amassed an amazing record as it relates to scoring, if I can speak, 51-1, 51 runs to 1 run over the course of the 2004 Olympics. So really excited to have these 3 panelists with us. Again, they all bring something really unique to this discussion, and excited to hear what they have to say based on the questions we have prepared. But then again, certainly for our audience, we welcome you to be a part of this as well. So I'm going to jump right in to our first question, and as the 3 of you know, everything that we're going to be discussing today is really about the role that coaches play, and not only athletes as it relates to their actions on the field, but how you can be involved in shaping their confidence, their leadership, the culture of the team as a whole. And so as you reflect on your career and everything that you've been able to bring to the table, thinking back over decades, let's start with you, Alicia. Ladies first. So, what is your why? What inspired you to get into the work that you're doing? Obviously, you've been an athlete, and dare I say, probably still hold on to your athletic roots. And I'm sure it shaped part of who you are, if not a lot of who you are. But what is your why as it relates to the work and the time and the commitment you have to the work there at the Tucker Center?
Yeah, so thank you for that nice introduction, by the way. I would say it comes from 2 places, really. It comes from my own growing up in sport, right? So sport gave me confidence, it gave me leadership, it gave me lifelong friendships. I mean, sport kept me in school. I have some severe learning disabilities. I wouldn't have graduated, I think, without sports, and it really became my community. But also, the second part of that is the research, because data really does tell the story. And so as I was being inducted to a Hall of Fame one time, I started to reflect and look at, my brother's experience versus the inductees' experiences, and then really looking, I have a son and a daughter, and looking at their different experiences in sport. And my lens expanded just immensely. And I started to have the language and the vocabulary to understand my experience versus like my brothers or my sons. And I decided that girls need to play just as much as boys, and the opportunities just aren't there at the same yet. So, when girls play, it gives them all these benefits, but it also impacts their family, the community, society as a whole. So I decided that in that time, I was committed for the rest of my life to build environments that support girls and help upskill coaches. And that's how I kind of got to the Tucker Center, and Tucker Center is all about let data tell the story. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I'm just thriving on those 2 things that really brought me in here.
Love it. It must be great to have your lived experience now be part of what you're able to do from a work perspective, and having that compare and contrast with brothers and sons, and what that looks like for them versus what it looked like for you growing up. So thank you for that. Coach Mike, same question. What's your why as it relates to the impact and the work that you've done that over decades as it relates to female athletes?
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was pretty easy for me because my passion was the bat and ball game. And so as a young kid, I always felt like I was going to be a major leaguer. Little did I know that the odds are pretty slim, but I had Tommy John surgery before Tommy John, but they didn't call it Mike Candrea surgery. So that kind of tells you where it's at. But yeah, I fell in love with that, and then to be honest with you, to get into coaching, it was because of an injury. I had a chance to start coaching, and then I started coaching, and then I fell in love with it, and then I really realized that I had a bigger vision for the game when I started coaching women at Central Arizona College. I mean, that was, I guess, my gift in life. God chose me to do that, and for a reason. And from that, I realized that sport was really all about preparing these young ladies for life after softball. So giving them the skills to be successful no matter what they chose. And that was kind of my why. That's kind of what I followed. My moral compass was making sure that they were prepared when they left, because there was no professional softball to look forward to back then, And so I think now I'm excited that at least kids have an option and an opportunity to maybe further their playing careers. But truthfully, at the end of the day, the one thing I loved about softball compared to baseball was that the women were there to get an education and move on in life, where every guy thought they were going to be in the big leagues, and therefore they didn't take their education very seriously. And I've sat in a room with a lot of men, crying men, as to what am I going to do with my life now that I just got released in minor league baseball. So I feel very fortunate to be able to have had that opportunity and do it for a long time. And by the way, the my last Olympic Games was 2008, and it happened to be a silver medal, one that I'm still having chills over. So it's not that easy sometimes.
Makes you appreciate the goal that much more,
Oh,
huh?
oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Coach, for bringing that to my attention, and my apologies there. Having previously worked in college athletics myself at University of Arkansas, University of South Carolina, the mindset of student athletes competing at that level is I'm going pro, and the plan B is certainly down a couple steps below. So I love your intentionality around seeing that their life after sport is going to come sooner than they might think, and supporting their dreams at the same time, obviously, but knowing what the reality is and how competitive it is to move on to the next level. Jay, same question for you, my friend. Obviously, you're a tremendous advocate and champion and ally for women's sports, and I know have been very intentional in what you've done to pour into the female student athletes and coaches in your circle. And so, what is your why?
Yeah, so I'll make this quick because you'll see this why kind of reflected in my other answers later today, I hope, Erica. But for me, I'm an educator. I think the older I get, the more I realize it was never about sports, but sports is my resume. And as an undergrad, I was working in sport, but I think, again, what fills my cup is just working with young people, especially the college age for me. And then the blessing that I've had in life is that the women who are strong leaders in my life, starting with my mother and then going in my undergrad career, I luckily was working alongside and got to spend some time with Pat Summit at the University of Tennessee. And then you go forward in my own career, and the mentors and the people who really impacted me early were all women. And it gave me a chance to relate better to women leaders in sport and to female student athletes. But it also showed me how impactful that they can be, not only to other women, but to our industry and to our world and to the work that I'm doing. And so that was a blessing, and makes it, I'm glad that I'm thought of as an advocate and an ally. I'm just giving back to what women gave to me, and that's it. So that's my why. That's what gets me going. And again, I would just say I'm an educator, and so.
Love it. And it sounds like it really comes naturally for you. It's not something that, I mentioned the word intentionality, but it seems like it's organically who you are based on your upbringing. And that must make it pretty effortless as it relates to just going about your business.
Well, that's why I say it. It's why I say it's a blessing, because the older I get, the more I realize, like, all the things that you try hard at sometimes aren't as natural. What I was given, I'll take and use as best I can to help others. So thanks. But yeah. That simple. I'm pretty simple.
I got you. And certainly, Jay, Coach, and Alicia, anything that you hear from your fellow panelists that you want to chime in on, we certainly welcome that as well. So we'll lead into another question here. So Alicia, this one's for you. So what do you think, in your experience, what makes coaching women uniquely different from coaching male athletes? Where does this show up? In the locker rooms, on the field, in the communication styles? What do you think is the difference there?
Well, I'm going to be really honest. Just to start with, sport wasn't designed for girls in mind. Because sport started a long time ago. And so for decades, the systems, the rules, the uniforms, all were built around male athletes. And we were expected to kind of fit into that mold. And I remember that so specifically as a girl growing up. And so you can't really, knowing who girls are in this world, both physically different and socially different, just, cut and paste and put it into that boys' playbook. So we have to really recognize who girls are and what they need in order to thrive. And so if we think about all the differences they have, I mean, they finally are starting to study like girls' injuries, right? So girls get more ACL injuries, and that has to do with when they go through puberty and what happens to their bodies. They get more ankle sprains, they can get more concussions, they concuss differently, they heal differently. The number one reason why girls leave sport is body confidence issues, not lack of skill. You think about adolescent girls and their menstrual cycles. And I think nearly half say that at some point menstrual cycles have impacted their participation. And I'll just tell you one little short story that's absolutely just, it sticks in our mind and we all laugh about this. My team, I ran track at Wisconsin. I was a sprinter and we had white briefs as our uniforms. And I can tell you there was 1 week every month that I did not worry about whether I was going to win that race. And we still laugh about it, right? So, but then we think about all the different invisible identities girls have that maybe we forget about, and that's like culturally. In some cultures, girls tend to, families are expecting them to stay at home at night to watch their siblings when the parents go to work, or even parent belief systems on girls right now. I mean, more parents feel strong about their sons playing. I think it's 41% of the importance of sport for boys versus only 30% for their daughters. I mean, that's really, really impactful. So I think when we're coaching, we really need to think about the whole person when it comes to a girl. And I think what we're seeing is this mostly shows up in the really small things, like how do girls respond to feedback? How do they internalize self-doubt? How do they how quickly their confidence can swing back and forth and whether they feel seen and supported. There's just so much going on that we don't recognize and talk about that's hidden, that we do have to start to think about that so that we can accept and see them for who they are and kind of lean in. And so once we start to lean into that challenge and we start to meet those girls where they are, we start to unlock and start to get them to trust. And then when they start to trust and they start to open up and they start to feel connected, that's when we are starting to build more resilient teams, that they stay engaged, they stay in longer, and they strive to go on and be better. So I think it's really important is recognizing who they are as individuals, and across the board, that's for boys too, right? But for girls, there's a lot of hidden things that we just haven't thought about. We haven't studied medically the differences between boys and girls and all the social impacts and the stereotypes and the biases. So we're getting through there. I see it's moving.
It's moving. Progress. So we celebrate progress in all the forms that it shows up. And I love what you said about what sports brings to the lives of young girls, because those skills and characteristics and traits that they learn as because they're playing sports doesn't leave them when they finish playing sports. They stay with them. They're the foundation of who they are as they move on into life after sports at whatever age that is. And for some people, there is no life after sports because until their last breath, they are playing sports and they're better for it. Coach Mike, obviously you spent some time coaching baseball on the men's side, and certainly a majority of your career has spent with women athletes, specifically collegiate student athletes. So would love to hear what that dynamic has looked like for you in terms of men and women. You spoke about it a little bit in your first answer, but would love to hear a little bit more from you.
Well, I'm kind of a novice of this, to be honest with you, because that wasn't my plan. I thought I was going to be a baseball coach all my life and never have to worry about coaching women. But God had different plans for me and gave me the great opportunity to coach the female athlete. And truthfully, as an athlete, I never treated them any differently. I had very high expectations. I had high demands. But the one thing I realized is that I felt like they were much more passionate than the male athlete. They just they're pleasers. They wanted to get better at the game. And so when I look at my career and I've coached men and coached women, I always say this. I say men have to play good to feel good. Women have to feel good to play good. And I really felt like I had to, that was the very first thing, is making them feel good about themselves. And if I couldn't make them feel good about themselves, then it didn't really matter who they were or what they were as an athlete. And that kind of changed everything because, I'm talking about back in the 70s, right around Title IX beginning, life was pretty simple. And the opportunities for the female athlete were completely different than they are today. And so the whole different set of parameters that we deal with today were not even there, but it was always there that I always had to try to build a relationship with these kids before I could coach them hard because I really felt like, and when I mean coaching them hard, I should probably clarify, it's not screaming and yelling at them. It's making them feel valuable and making them feel like they're going to be confident because they're getting better at the skills. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think at the end of the day, it was, women have to feel good to play good. So I spent my entire life making young women feel good about themselves first, and then worry about them as an athlete second.
Can I jump in here for a second? Because I think this is brilliant.
Please.
So I've talked a lot about this, but it's when we say feel good, it's feel good socially, emotionally, mentally, physically, academically, like it all plays into it as they go through. And it's not because that's how we were born. It's how we experience in our lives in society right now. So there's a lot of societal pressures. There's those stereotypes of roles. I think it's 89% of girls feel like they're pressured into certain roles and stereotypes, but all of that plays part to where they are right now. And so what Mike is saying, exactly right, like this is where they are right now. And he's, you need to think about it and have them feel good before they play, versus boys do tend to, if they're having a bad day, they're going to go play to feel good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for adding, Alicia. And having that compare and contrast there, Coach Mike, I think definitely with having spent the majority of your career with women, you were able to take what you learned and been able to just impart that on them for many years thereafter. So kind of going back to that first aha moment when you realized that that's how you had to approach working with female athletes, like what was the moment, what was going on that made you know that you needed to change your approach?
Well, for me, it was I kind of go into eras because I was blessed to be able to coach for 50 years. Um, much of that in softball, and times changed. I mean, when I began coaching in the 70s, it was coach kids hard, coach the skills, not worry about them as an individual. And then I think in 2000, I'm guessing around 2000, I really realized that I had an aha moment that, you know what, I can't just keep coaching the athlete. I have to spend more time coaching the person. And that was because of the influx of social media. There was much more pressures because our game has grown and there's more eyeballs put on the game. And those are some parameters that I never had the kids worry about back in the day. They came to school to get an education and play softball because they somewhere along the line they had a passion to play, and they played multiple sports. And then all of a sudden now we've got these kids specializing in softball. They're playing year round. They're spending money on lessons, and the parents are expecting more because of all the money that they put into the game. So it brought a lot of different parameters that I had to deal with. And I really realized that, man, you know what? I got to spend more time just dealing with the person. If I can make them feel good about themselves and who they are and what they represent, they're strong, powerful women, then the game will take care of itself. Because I never thought the game was end of the road anyway. I use the game as a platform to develop young people.
Love that. Love that. It's just a vehicle. I've got one more, and then we'll stop for any questions from the audience. So if you have any, definitely you can put it in the chat, or you can come off mute and we can get that from you. But thank you for that, Coach. I think that again, sports is just a vehicle. And you talked about how you had other plans for what your sports career was going to look like. And you're probably familiar with the term man plans and God laughs. So God had other ideas as to how he wanted you to go about your business. Jay, I've got one for you here, and you spoke about it a little bit. The opportunity now will present itself to expand upon it. So when we talk about just the culture and the empowerment piece of women athletes and women administrators in your realm, what are your personal experiences? And again, you hit on it a little bit. What are your personal experiences that have shaped the way that you support and empower female athletes specifically as we dive deep into this topic?
Yeah, I tell a story a lot, and I did not work on her staff, and I was not with her all the time, but I was very blessed. When I was an undergraduate student, I knew Pat Summitt's husband at the time a little. I was working in the athletic department, and because she knew loosely who I was, so I want to be careful with this. We weren't best buds, we didn't hang out. But what I knew is you're watching one of the greatest leaders in sport history. You need to go soak it up. And I just loved leadership. What I learned from Pat was that, and I tell this story all the time, she would stand on the end line of the court, and whoever's day it was that day in practice was just going to get eaten up. And to Mike's point, she didn't cut any corners. She wasn't easy on any of those women. But when they walked off that court, she would stand right at that end line very intentionally and give them a hug and say, practice is over. You know I love you. We're done with that for today. And what I saw was, if you can show young people that you care about them, you can be a dynamic leader, and you can be as tough as you need to be on the other side. I think the other thing that I learned, and this is just, I have some benefit. You grow up with a tough Southern mother, and that's where my discipline comes from, is mom. And so at the end of the day, again, those things gave me a view that I never really thought about. Well, how am I going to treat these women different than these male athletes? I watched one of the greatest of all time simply show care and love. And it goes back, and Alicia hit it, and Mike hit it. They're more than athletes. These are young people and humans that we're shaping to be great people. But oh, by the way, they can perform amazingly talented athletic abilities if they know that you care. It drives our athletes. So that's a little bit of it. In the league, empowerment for me starts with just humility to say, what do I care about the most, and where do I need the most help? And then I want that role of helping me with that. And what I did was, our championships are the thing I care about the most. Let's make these the greatest events we can. Our SWA group helps me with championships. Let's take the group that is least represented in the league, whoever that may be. And in this case, it was women who weren't getting enough leadership. And I said, I need your help. And I can't fake how much I care about that area. And then what that does is allows our ADs and presidents to suddenly engage with these women when they weren't before. So little things like that. But again, that part of it I'm intentional with. But it just happened to be women in this case. It could be a different underrepresented group. But what I found in both the leagues I was in is that the SWAs in particular were not getting the empowerment they needed. So hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. It's all about opportunity, right? Just opportunity. And when you talked about just Coach Summit, what a great story. And any stories that allow me to just learn more about her. And you're right, one of the greatest of all time. What you said reminded me of a quote that many of us have probably heard before. People don't care how much they know until they know how much you care. And so from that standpoint, her just taking the basketball out of it really allowed them to lean into the person and who they are outside of what happened on the court or the field or the pool or the track that particular day. I still care about you regardless of those pieces. So Saxton, with your help, can you let me know if we've got a quote in the chat? Maybe you can read it, or we can have our audience member come off mute and read their question. And I will say we've got a WeCOACH prize pack that we will send out to the first person whose question that Saxton will be sharing with the group.
Yes, so our first question is from Megan Peters. I'm going to read a little bit of background and then jump into her question. So she says, I have a girl on my basketball team who struggles with playing sports and pleasing her mom. I had to go talk to her mom 3 different times throughout the season to convince her to keep her daughter on the team. I also had a player who was supposed to go to college to play soccer, and her parents wouldn't let her go. My question is, how do you empower female athletes when the people at home are doing the opposite? How can I make my voice louder than their family's voice?
Yeah. Anyone want to jump in first?
Well,
it's a mouthful.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I go back to when I recruited. I never recruited a kid unless I went to their home. And the reason for that is I wanted to see how they were brought up and what were the principles that the parents had. And sometimes I mean, there's not much you can do. I mean, unfortunately, the young lady is going to get to a point where she realizes that she's old enough to do what she wants to do, and she needs to do that. But for me to get in the middle of that as a coach, there's no way in hell to do that. I would probably move on and let her figure it out. And that's not a good answer. But I feel very bad for her. Kids chase dreams for different reasons. I mean, how many times you see, and I see it all the time, young ladies give up opportunities because their boyfriend is going somewhere else. And to me, that's just like, and it's just happened, a couple of times this past year where we've had some very talented young ladies fall in love with a basketball player who now is cross country and making a little bit of money, and they follow him in his career instead of theirs. So you're hoping that you can empower those kids early on that they can make their own decisions and take care of themselves, because that's the one thing I always told our young ladies is I want you to not have to worry about depending on anyone, because you have everything that it takes to be successful on your own. And I think that's got to start early. And I think the more we do that with young women, the more you're not going to see this happen. But you know, that's kind of life. I look at my dad. My dad was a jazz musician, and we gravitated from New York to New Orleans, where I was born, to Phoenix. And you can imagine going to Phoenix, Arizona back in the 60s. I mean, it was like cowboys and Indians, and it was completely different. But I look at my mom, and my mom was a beautiful lady, but she never drove, never drove a car. She was just the house mom. And back then that was very common, but today that's not common. I the young lady that I picked to take over for me, Caitlin Lowe, 4-time, well, she's a 2-time Olympian. She's a 4-time All-American. And I I wanted to make sure she knew that she could have a family and still be a head coach and coach. And that has happened for her. Is it easy? No. But can it happen? Absolutely. And the greatest thing about today is we have many examples of successful things happening for female athletes. You know, we're back in the 70s. Boy, it was hard to find an example because there weren't many. We were still lucky to play 5-on-5 basketball and use the whole court. You know, I look back at my high school days and I can't remember what sports were offered in my high school for women. I remember the GAA, which was the Girls Athletic Association, but I mean, and I'm not, yeah, I'm 70 years old, so I went to high school in 73. And if I can't remember that, you can imagine how much things have changed in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And so no, so that's the one thing I love is there's many more good examples for young women to learn from.
And
Yep.
before you jump in, Alicia, real quick, I think what Coach Mike said is a perfect example of what you said, that sports were not made for women.
Yeah.
So we found a way for ourselves, but you know, his memory of it very much aligns with what you said as we began this webinar.
Yeah, and you have to remember it takes 3 generations for real change, and we're not quite there yet. I was the victim of following my husband, who was a pro hockey player, and left mine, and going through that. And I see it now all the time with girls. It's getting better, but we're not there yet. Society still has these stereotypes and biases. But I think to answer that question is really, as a coach, maybe take the time to understand why. What is the parent's perspective? Are they have safety concerns? Do they, is there some cultural or gender norms that are hidden under there that we're not sure, that hidden identity? Are there some barriers with costs or academics? What is that? And then kind of trying to reframe the value of sport and understand, share with the parent about the value of sport and what it does bring. And it does bring occupationally, if someone's going to go play college, that pathway really opens up to what they can be. And even just playing in high school, how important that is, and how it builds community and all the benefits that it gets, the social, the emotional, the mental, the physical, the occupational, all of that. So I think, just having that conversation with the coach would probably be the best step. But as Mike said, it's not, you do not have the power to make that choice for that family. It's the family's choice.
Yeah, definitely
Awesome.
a tough situation. Saxon, can you hit us with one more, please? It looked like we had a few in the chat, and I definitely want to make sure that we're honoring our audience even more so than the questions I have prepared. So thank you for your help on that.
We are going to jump down one because I think the second one is going to be answered through this conversation already. But the second one says, as a parent and coach, what tips do you have for how we can start building a solid foundation into young athletes ages 11 through 15 when it comes to identity and how they see themselves, to get away from this performance culture where mistakes in the game define who are allowing them to define them more than who they are as a person?
Well, yeah, that's a, if I can answer,
Please.
kind of an interesting thing because I'm always looking at youth sports and what are we doing to develop our youth to get them to appreciate the whole experience. It's not about just winning. And I really felt like we do a disservice to our young kids because I see it every day. In today's generation it's all about winning, and they don't realize softball is a game of failure. So one of the most powerful tools that I have is to teach kids how to handle failure and how to handle failure moving forward, which is it's gonna serve them for a lifetime. And so I think for me it was getting coaches to understand that the most important thing in certain areas of development is skill development. When you're a young kid, you want to develop your skills because we talk about kids not being confident. Well, the reason why they're not confident is because they're not very good at it. Number one. Number two is we're not very good at developing practice to where there's involvement by everyone. You go out and watch a little league practice, you're going to see one kid hitting, you're going to see 10 kids shagging, standing in the outfield, and they wonder why people are not playing baseball anymore as much as they used to. So I think sometimes we have to kind of reflect on ourselves. What are we doing to help promote this growth? And Alicia, you were so perfect about your growth. I mean, the things that I look at with young women is when they come in as a freshman, they're very shy, they're not confident about themselves, and they always say, well, how do you make people confident? Well, I go, well, it's not something that you sprinkle over them and they're going to be confident. I think for a coach or for a leader, to me, I always call it the 3 C's. You have to be competent. So I have to be a student of the game too, because the better information I have that I give to my kids, the better they become. The other thing is you have to be consistent. I think young people need consistency. And even in sport, consistency allows you to perform. If you look at any player, they do things consistently the same because it helps their performance. But I think at the end of the day, it's caring. It's C for caring. At the end of the day, if they don't think that I care about them as an individual, I'm going to lose them. And so I value this one thing. And I'll give you something I do every day. Every morning I get up, in my planner, I have every kid that I've coached, and I text them a happy birthday. That's how I start my morning. And to me, that's the most important thing because I am part of their life forever. And that's the one thing I love about the female athlete. You have a good relationship with them, and you will have a relationship with them for a lifetime. You will live through their family and their kids. And to me, I think that is, I mean, that's my blessing working with young women.
Love it. The 3 C's.
3 C's.
You have to be competent, you have to be consistent, you have to be caring.
Yep.
Love it. Love it. Anything to add there, Alicia or Jay?
Yeah, I came off mute real quick. They're 11 to 15-year-olds, and even at the college level, our young people need to know and learn how to fail, and fail over and over and over again, because that's what life will give you is difficulties and struggles. And even as a parent, so I'll pick on myself and say, I don't I fix an awful lot of things for my sons, maybe not even intentionally, but it's easy in today's world with the amount of access and so on we have to fix things for young people, as opposed to letting them fail. And I think at 11 to 15-year-olds, they need to have fun in their mistakes out there. They need to learn to laugh when they fall down or miss the ball, or and I think moms and dads make it tough to accept that I had a horrible day at practice today, and I'll be back out there tomorrow. And I think that's one thing that lesson of sport is why I told you I'm an educator, and sport was a part of it. But the thing that stays with sport is we win and we have lessons, right? And those lessons is something that sport gives these young people that not much else is doing right now in our society. And so I would tell you that solid foundation comes from how often do they fail and what did they do with it? And as a coach, what did you do with it? They're 11 to 15 years old. They're not meant to be the next Cat Osterman out there. Just let them fail. And what do you do with it? So that would be my advice on that one. And you talk about building the foundation, that'll give it to them because they'll learn how to handle it, and that'll put them ahead of an awful lot of peers right now.
Love that. When you think about baseball and softball, I mean, a good batting average is somewhere in the 300s. So that means 7 out of 10 times you're getting out, you're striking out, you're walking back to the dugout, not happy about the results. And coming from the tennis world, I previously worked for the USTA. Most tennis players lose and then they move on to the next tournament. You got to compartmentalize it and on to the next. And how did you react and not let it continue to spiral into the next match, the next game? I know, having worked at University of South Carolina, Coach Staley gave her student athletes the 24-hour rule. You can't be too high. You can celebrate, you can, lull about the loss, but then you've got to move on after 24 hours. So looked like you had something also to add to this, Alicia. Would love your feedback and input.
No, I made great answers, and Mike's gonna, when I talk some more, we talk about care, competence, and choices of 3 C's, and I love that he's bringing that.
You're on the same page. Well, we're going to stay with you then, Alicia. You can come back off mute, my friend. I got another question for you. So when we talk about trust and confidence and connection, how do you help athletes navigate confidence issues, especially in competitive environments where self-doubt can creep in? I feel like you've got a little bit about this.
I do. Yeah. And having a daughter and having a partner with 2 daughters and coaching girls for so long, I do know this pretty well. But, confidence for us, especially on the girls' side, is much like Wi-Fi. In and out, right? Up, down, in and out. And it always seems to really drop right before that big moment. And it's been challenging, right? So what the Tucker Center has found in the research is kind of what Mike is talking about, and what Jay talked about a little bit too, is that care, confidence, and choices. And those are, supporting girls' needs in a consistently over time is how you can actually start to make changes and adjustments. But like with caring's really about asking questions, listening to their answers, showing that they're valued, as people, not just athletes, and understanding who they are. And the data shows that girls who feel heard by their coaches, 2.5 more times likely to stay in sport. That's huge.
Wow.
Okay. And for instance, I was an athletic director, and when I came in, I came in and there were 9 athletic directors in the 4 years behind me, or in the 4 years before me. We were the 3rd largest school in the state, a big urban school, and our girls' participation was really low. And they brought me in for this. And one of the things I did was I actually, softball, we really couldn't field a team. So we tried to figure out what the heck the problem was. There's some girls that wanted to play. So I listened to the girls, and they really needed some adjustment in times. They needed to practice after school. They needed to have transportation. They couldn't take the city bus to the field that was off site, and because they had to be home later. There was a lot of different cultures that were participating, and they couldn't play on Saturdays because they were expected to work. And so I actually switched all of that around, their schedule. And by the end of the 2nd year, we had 2 full teams of players because it showed care. And I worked with the coach, and it was awesome. So that's really, caring's really important. And then the confidence, like Mike said, we want to succeed, right? And so when I talk, and I'm talking about youth in high school, it might be a little different than an elite college player, D1 or an Olympian, but still we know we're good. But the key to confidence is really focusing on the skill and not, you did a great job or that wasn't good. It's really getting specific about what it is, like, your hip work, the power that you had in that kick. It's the little things in the way you word that start to build competence, and you're reframing the mistake as growth. If you're talking about maybe your foot plant versus, you didn't score, kind of a thing. So it's really doing effort praised, fosters that resilience and mindset. And, something I think about a lot is my daughter played hockey with the boys, and she never wanted to be a forward. The boys always wanted to be forwards. They always wanted to score. And she kept going to the defense because she was scared to fail. And the coach, I finally talked to the coach. I was like, listen, you just got to make her. You just got to go up there, and you just got to let her fail. You got to expect the failure and let her know that it's okay. And by the end, she ended up turning into a forward, and, she went on and kept playing. And then the third thing is choices. And this is really important, is what girls experience in society is a lot. So if you think about the Barbie movie and all that we are expected to be able to go into a space where you have a coach who cares, who you're going to try to reach, your best potential, to be offered choices in could be something as simple as what you want to do as a warm up, or the music, or what drill you want to do at the end of the day, is powerful because it gives girls a voice. And girls tend right now, the new research studies showed that 2 out of 3 girls don't speak up because they're afraid they want to be liked. And so, and the social media has a lot to do with this, but this is where voice matters. So having that opportunity to make choices, and all of this, if you do it consistently, like Mike said, you start to change. It starts to change the whole, confidence issue thing. And there's no magic wand. It changes it. There's no sprinkle dust. But I think those 3 things, care, competence, and choices, are in doing them consistently. I'll add that 4th one in.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to ask one more. I'm going to skip ahead in the prepared questions I had, because I really want to make sure that we leave time for questions from our audience. So one last one. I'm going to start with you, Jay, on this one. So as we, think about the future of sports and of the coaches who are all in this webinar, what is one thing every coach listening today can do this week to create a more empowering environment for the athletes they serve? What's one thing every coach listening today can do this week to create a more empowering environment for the athletes they serve? And we'll go to you, Alicia, next, and then we'll finish with you, Coach.
Yeah. So one of my absolute all-time favorite quotes is Albert Einstein, where he talks about everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, they'll live their whole life thinking they're a failure. So take that concept, and I want you as coaches, what I would encourage you to do is, with every single athlete on your team, find something that they do well. It may be that they pick up trash as they leave the locker room. It may be, it could be big or it could be tiny, and tell them that. I really love it when you do X, and just watch what happens. And every single person on your team, every single player does something really, really well. The other thing it will give you, and this is what it gives me as I work with at the league level, about 200 coaches. Not all of them are so easy to deal with sometimes. Coaches are type A and they have big egos, and that's what makes them great, right? But sometimes as a commissioner, that stuff. But what I will also tell you that it will give to you is for the ones you're struggling with, it teaches you to find, what do I actually really respect about this person? What's something that, boy, that they're just fantastic at. So it's self-gratifying too, but for your team, just watch what happens when you say, you know what, I really love it that you always do this for your teammates, or I love how you did this in practice, or whatever it may be. So hope that works.
Love it. And I love the leaning into the good. So often that we want to admonish them for their mistakes, but just leaning into recognizing good behavior, because we know psychologically, and I'm far from the expert here, but we know that when we acknowledge and we celebrate the good, we continue to do those good things, and we do them even more because those have been recognized. So Alicia, same question for you, my friend.
I love that, Jay, because as girls, we tend to really focus in on everything that we did wrong versus what we did right. And which tends to be the opposite with boys, who tend to believe they did
Middle-aged men do the same thing. Just for anyone
There
with
you
the
go.
partners out there, just a heads up. Watch Mike shake his head. Sorry.
No, that's good. So I appreciate saying that, because I do think that's really important, is that you're recognizing what they're doing good and focusing on that. So not to say that's the one that I'm going to focus on. I would say, if on top of that, really it's focusing on those 3 C's, and asking her and understanding her life and her hidden identities, and starting to be true to who she is, and focusing on her skill and her things, and not comparing her to her teammates and competing against her teammates, but competing against herself, and really giving that team some choices and what they want to do. It really will open things up. So I'd say focus on the 3 C's.
Coach Mike,
Well, that was really good. Yeah, I don't really have a lot more to add to either one of those. I guess the one thing I would say is look in the mirror and how can I get better as a leader to help our young people get better at what they want. I mean, sometimes we kind of look at them, and sometimes it might be maybe the way I'm communicating. Maybe, people talk about culture. Well, culture is not something that's driven by you, it's driven by the players, right? And it took me a while to understand that. Slogans on your walls don't make a culture, so the culture is all about accountability. And that's one of the toughest things with young people, is to have them feel comfortable holding each other accountable. But if you can get to a point where they can do that, then you've got a very powerful culture that can do about anything.
Love it. I was just thinking, as Coach Mike was speaking, that if I wasn't moderating this, I would have loved to have been an attendee, because you all have dropped so many nuggets here in the last 56 minutes. And so I'm going to end from my prepared questions and the structured part of this, and throw it back to Saxon for some more questions to close us out from our audience. And then at that point, again, whoever wants to jump in with an answer, we'll go organically that way.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. We have about 4 minutes, so I think this might be a good question to finish this off on. How do you teach the mental side of the game and get the high school age girls to buy into it?
Well, the sport that I coach, there's a lot of it that's mental. I mean, it's probably 99% mental. And I think the biggest thing about teaching the mental game is defining what the mental game is to young people. It's not, mental game should be something that you're practicing every day, just like you do catching ground balls or throwing. And everyone thinks that the mental game is kind of like you get in a tent and you talk about the brain and this and that, and that's not what it is. Mental game is about being able to recuperate from whatever happens on the field in a positive way, to keep it simple. The mental game should empower you. It doesn't guarantee you performance, but it empowers you to have the best performance that you possibly can. And so it's really about handling distractions. And so the mental game to me was never separated in in the things that I did. The mental game was something I worked on every day with people, because I really felt like that's once they have the skills, when you're dealing with elite athletes, for instance, dealing with the Olympians, I've got the very best players in the world, 18 of the best players. And people always said, well, what makes them so good? I looked at them every day and I go, I've got some college kids that are as good as they are. I mean, physically, but what they have that is so powerful is they have the database. They've played this game for such a long time that they have more to draw from. And I think that's part of the mental game is the more you do something, the more you have things to draw from. Hopefully I'm a smarter guy dealing with my kids now than I was 30 years ago. I know I am, you know. One of the worst things as a professional coach was learning how to deal with my own kids. I probably flunked that one. I was better with other people's kids than my own. So it's a balancing act. But the mental game is the fun part of the game. That's why I love playing golf because I can go out and shoot 78 one day and shoot 86 the next day, and it's the same guy. So a lot of it is just it's controlling what's going on in this noggin. But the thing getting back to the Olympians, the one thing they had that I try to teach our kids all the time was emotional stability. They never got too high, never got too low. They always stayed kind of in that zone where you can perform because if you get too high, you can't perform. If you get too low, you can't perform. So where do I need to be to play my best softball or my best basketball? And that's the mental game, is being able to stay in that moment. But this is a conversation we could have for 2 hours, about the mental game because none none of the things that we do every day is an exact science. And life is a game of failure. I have failed more than I have been successful. I've won 1,600 games. I've lost 400 games. I probably learned more from the 400 I lost than I did the 1,600 that I won. And so I think the big thing with young kids is let them fail and understand that failure is powerful. It's a teaching tool. And that's part of the mental game is how do I use my failures to become better at what I do?
Can I jump in real quick? And get really specific to high school, Mike. That's great. That's great. I would say when you're dealing with high school girls, which is really challenging, just because I have 2 high school girls in the house right now. So that was a personal note, not. But one is you just really need to normalize the mental game. And so you talk to the girls about, if we're training our bodies today, we're going to train our mind and do an activity every day that has to do with that. And really make those activities practical and tangible. It can be something as like a routine before, if you're playing basketball, like before a free throw, that's a mental game when you do a routine and you do breath work. Or you say, okay, we're going to only positive talk for the next 3 minutes. That is that's building resilience in your brain. That's, or we're going to have a self-talk reset where, no negative self-talk. These are all little things that help to grow the mental game. And, there's journals and goal setting for each game, each practice, each game, something really simple like today, in the game, I'm, I'm gonna, if I start to get too upset, I'm gonna reach down and touch my toes, and that's my reset button. That works a lot for some athletes, but I'd say as you start to do that, one of the key things is really building that trust and belonging first. So they have to know that you have their back and they can trust you, and you're following through, and you're not also attacking them on their mental game and belittling them in any way. So it's really focusing in, normalizing it, making really practical and tangible, simple steps to begin with as you build it, and then build that trust and belonging.
Very good.
Well, I will hop on and just thank you all for being here and thank you for being a part of the webinar. Want to thank our panelists, Jay, Alicia, and Mike, for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And a special thanks to you, Erica, for being an awesome moderator and helping drive this conversation for all of us.